Jay, what's the cheapest documentary you've ever made?
I want to say, free, no money, but there's no such thing as a free documentary. It costs, your time's worth this. You had to pay for the equipment, blah blah blah. But anyway, there's a lot of them, a good number of them that I don't put anything financially into them other than what I already have in my time. So I own 2 cameras. I have a small Sony that I did interviews on for a long time, and now I have a Blackmagic 6K Cinema that I do interviews on, and my shooting partner in California has a Blackmagic 6K that he shoots on. I have my own sound gear, so I do it all. I have a ongoing subscription to Storyblocks for my supplemental B-roll and then whatever B-roll I shoot on set. And then occasionally I take kind of a journalistic approach with documentaries where I typically don't pay for interviews. Now occasionally, depending on the person or their status within that genre, I may, pay a few $100s or $1,000 for an interview, but very rarely. Most of the time I don't. So it's just maybe a little travel, and that's about it for the most part.
And for sound, what do you use?
I have an Audio-Technica shotgun mic. I think it costs like maybe $120. And then I have a set of Sennheiser lavs and a Zoom H6 or H4, sorry. And I'll use that.
How do you write your documentary scripts?
So I don't really write them in a traditional sense. Like I don't do a lot of pre-structuring of my documentaries. I've started to kind of experiment with that a little more as I'm doing more, like inserting myself into them and writing more voiceover in those parts. So that has become a little more of a thing. But for the most part, I pick a subject, I write, the same questions usually for most of the interviews, usually around 25, and I usually only get to maybe 6 of the questions. Because the way I usually take it is I let the questions lead to other questions. And so sometimes it becomes something totally different than I even anticipated. And then one of my strengths has an editor. I mean, I've directed forever, but for a good chunk of my career, I was making most of my living, at least freelance-wise, as an editor. So like I'm pretty good at taking, these interviews and shaping it into a narrative like fairly quickly. And like that's how I approach it. And there's not a right and wrong way. There's people that totally structure their stuff out and they plan it and great. I personally don't. I just I do the interviews. I let the interview lead me where, the documentary takes.
What elements do your low-budget documentaries have to have?
So the main thing that's important to me when I'm approaching a documentary is I want to be talking to people that are passionate about their subject. To be honest, I don't really care too much what the subject is. I mean, I want to be slightly interested in it, but I don't need to know anything about it. For me, it's about the people. So I need to connect with them personally on some level. So that's important to me, and it's also important to me. I don't like to do exploitive things. I don't like to ambush people or be antagonistic. I also, and this in some ways this is a flaw of mine. I'm conflict averse. So I won't do the kind of interviews where I'm like pushing for something or trying to provoke a negative emotional reaction. So it's mostly, it just has to be. It sounds a little hippy-dippy, but I want it to do a positive spin on things, and I do Bigfoot documentaries, but I want it to be informational and fun, and I'm not trying to scare anybody or absolutely prove the existence or disprove the existence. I just I want it to be entertaining and of value to a certain audience, and even within those audiences, there's going to be segments of them that don't like it. There's a huge segment of the Bigfoot community that hates my stuff because I'm not presenting new evidence. I'm not, going out there and, doing what they call the work, searching for Bigfoot. I don't care about that. I don't care if Bigfoot does exist. I'm interested in the people, and I like that. And there's other people that do. There's a niche audience for it. And like I said, I do a lot of introductory into things. So for a lot of Bigfoot people, they know all this introductory stuff. So it's just repeated information for them. So they're like, you're just repeating all this information. You're not adding anything new to it. And I was like, there's a ton of people that don't know this, and it's for them. It's not for you. You know, and that's I approach. If I do a MMA documentary or a documentary on fighting, we did one with an MMA fighter, a boxer, and a pro wrestler, and it was about, for the general public, like, this is what these people's lives are. For Uber fans, they're going to know all that stuff and it's repeated information, but there's other people that really get something out of those, and I like that.
Yeah, we talked off camera about how sometimes the fan of something is more interesting than the subject of what you're covering. Yeah,
yeah. I find
interesting.
I find in most of the documentaries I've done, the people are way more interesting than the actual subject, you know. But then there's others, like we just did a series of diet documentaries, and I am super interested in that. You know, like I just turned 50. I'm really, you know, I want to be healthy into my, you know, 70s and whatnot. So I am interested. I want to hear what the experts say, and I find that fascinating.
Why do you think you make more money off of your documentary films than you do of your narrative films?
So I said that, but it's not. I don't necessarily, individually, the documentaries don't make more money than the narratives. I mean, individually, like one-to-one, narratives make more, like exponentially more. The reason that I make more money off documentaries collectively is because I have more of them. And at least for me, like, I can make a documentary in a week, you know, and I mean, from shooting to post, I can do it. And I am happy with that quality. And for me, that's it's good. It's good enough. It's, you know, it's serving its purpose. It's giving the audience what they need. And I'm not saying that you can't do that with a narrative. There are people that do. I used to do it back in the day, but I've hit a point where, at least with narratives, I'm not happy taking that approach anymore. So for me, a narrative, like, I have to have a certain amount of days to shoot it. I have to have a certain amount of time to edit it. You know, so I tend to, you know, have a year and a half between narrative features now, because, like, that's how long I want to spend on it. The documentaries I can do faster, so I have more of them, so they make up more of my income.
Well, you've said on your Jay Horton YouTube channel that the documentaries, even though you love them, that's your work, that's your bread and butter.
Yes.
That's kind of your 9 to 5, and then the narrative is something that you take more time with. That's kind of what you aspire to do more. So
yeah, absolutely. The narratives, literally, the documentaries have become my 9 to 5. Like, you know, in between features, you know, I wrapped A Hard Place. Well, we shot in February. We shot for, I think, 12 days in February. And then we had 2 months off, and then had to shoot pickups in LA. And during those 2 months, I was editing A Hard Place. I spent that whole time. And then we shot the pickups. And then I finished editing on Hard Place. And then I turned it over to, you know, composer, VFX, score. And then while they're working on that, which is, you know, a month to 2 period, I start cranking out documentaries again. So I'm doing them really fast. So I've made 3 or 4, you know, in the month that I've given over the, you know, the post of A Hard Place. And then that'll come back to me. I'll work on Hard Place for another month, and then that'll be done and, you know, ready to be delivered. And then I'll go back and I'll do documentaries for another 3-4 months. And then, like, early next year, we'll be starting to either raise money for or shoot the next movie.
And how many Bigfoot documentaries do you have?
You know, I don't know off the top of my head. Probably 6 or 8. Yeah, I mean, I've done a few, and overall, and the other thing I want people to take away from this, like, if I say that I make the most money off Bigfoot documentaries, doesn't mean everyone will. It'll be something different for you. For me, the Bigfoot cryptid documentaries have been the most financially viable on a consistent level. There's others that have, you know, peaked up and stuff, but for the most part, those have been pretty much the big earners.
What final advice do you have for any independent filmmakers who want to start making documentaries on a lower budget? And maybe define what that budget is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So for anybody that wants to do documentaries on a low budget, and this advice kind of goes for narratives too, like, you have to do them for absolutely as cheap as possible. But I think the main, I've talked about the cheap a lot. So my main piece of advice would be, when you're making independent films, like a superpower of mine is I know when to walk away. Like and by walk away, I mean, I know when, okay, this is good enough, or this is as good as it's going to get. I'm okay with this. I'm okay with where it is, and put it out. Because you can indefinitely edit or work on a thing forever. You could, and I have. But if you're going to make do kind of the day job, crank them out thing, you have to treat it like that. You got to treat it a little bit like an assembly line. I know that sounds cold and impractical, but you got to think about it like that. And you got to be like, the main thing with really low budget movies, whether they're narratives or documentaries, your odds are you're not going to make a ton off them. There's a lot of these. Like, if you took my 60 documentaries, added them up, and divided them by the number of months they've been out, I would bet I'd probably have a mean average of something like $200 a month, like on average on a doc, which sounds not good, So, but you have to look at it then. If you have a thing that's only going to make $200 a month, so over the course of a year, it's going to make $2,000, something like that, a little more. So like, you got to look at it like, this is going to make $2,000 in a year. What does $2,000 of my time look like? And sometimes, it's a couple of days for me anyway. So like, that is the way I approach it. I approach it mathematically.